Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into this week's editions of my starts and sits for week 8 of the fantasy football season. I know I'm going to keep on saying this, but I'm still kind of mind blown. We're already almost to November. It's almost Thanksgiving, and then Christmas is right around the corner. So the season's flying by. Hope you guys been winning your games. We're in that bye week stretch of the schedule. Even though we're like right there in the middle of the calendar, these are important games. You got to try to stack up wins so you can try to get in and at least close a playoff spot over these next few weeks. So let's just see if I can help you guys out. And as always, I'm going to give you my top starts and sits for the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position. And you guys know the drill. I am going to start with the most important position in football, quarterback. So my top start of the week, I'm gonna go with Tua Tagovailoa against the Lions. The Lions, obviously, we all kind of know at this point of the season they have one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and teams have not only been able to run the ball on the ground against them. Towards my next section, but they've also been able to pass against them. When you look at the terms as far as fantasy, they are allowing 20.8 points per game against quarterbacks. That's the fourth most in the NFL. I can definitely see that secondary struggling with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle throughout the game. So I think Tua could have one of those 250 plus 2 to 3 touchdown performances for you on Sunday. Moving into my next start, I'm going with Kirk Cousins against the Cardinals. The Cardinals defense, similar defense where you've been able to throw the ball against them and move the ball pretty easily and get some points. And when you look at as far as terms of fantasy, they're allowing 19.5 points per game, and that's the sixth most across the NFL, allowing to quarterbacks. So Kirk's coming right off a bye week. That offense is going to be as healthy as it has been all season. They're going to be refreshed to face the Cardinals. And when you got Justin Jefferson, KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen, a guy I'm going to talk about later, Dalvin Cook, he can dump the ball off to. Man, I could see this being and also too, I know Arizona's kind of struggled on offense, but I got this feeling this is going to be like a barn burner type of matchup. I could see whoever wins this game, winning like a 35-31 game. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored. So if you got Kirk Cousins, or if he's out there and you want to stream him because maybe you're missing Patrick Mahomes this week or Justin Herbert, I'd go pick up Cousins and put him in your lineup this week. Now, my top sits, guys I would avoid not playing this week, would be Trevor Lawrence against the Broncos. It's pretty simple with the Broncos defense. I don't have to keep on saying this every week. They got a really great defense. It's just their offense stinks. And then when you look at the fantasy points per game, they're giving up 9.6 points per game to quarterbacks in the NFL. That's the fewest. So that doesn't even get you double digits. So obviously quarterbacks and offenses as a whole have been struggling against that Broncos defense, and I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon for the Denver defense. So if you're thinking about playing Trevor Lawrence, this is definitely the week I would avoid it. My other sit, I'm going with Aaron Rodgers against the Bills. Now, the Packers obviously are looking terrible. They're 10.5 point underdogs. I think at least that's what they were at the beginning of the week. So obviously this is going to be a potential blowout. But you maybe could think maybe I can get some garbage points out of Rodgers. But when we look at that Packers offense, it's been struggling this year, especially trying to throw the ball. And when you look at the Bills' defense, as far as fantasy, they're only giving up 10.8 points per game. That's the third fewest across the NFL as well. And then the Packers' offensive line hasn't been that great. And that Bills' defensive front is awesome. And Buffalo is coming off a bye week as well. So they're going to be a refreshed defense to get after Rodgers and try to create those turnovers for their team. So if you're thinking about playing Rodgers, I think his days of being a top fantasy quarterback seem to have come to an end. Anyways, my top starts: Tua Tagovailoa against the Lions and Kirk Cousins against the Cardinals. My sits: Trevor Lawrence against the Broncos and Aaron Rodgers against those Bills. Moving into my top starts and sits for the running back position, as I kind of hinted to earlier, not only the Detroit Lions have been bad defending the pass, but they've also been giving up a lot of fantasy points on the ground. So that's why I think Raheem Mostert's definitely a great play. I know Chase Edmonds hasn't been doing much as of late. I think he could be a sneaky flex play if you are looking for a bye week replacement, or if maybe you're putting together a daily fantasy football lineup and maybe you're looking for a cheap play Chase Edmonds could be there for you as well. Like I mentioned, the Lions, they've been struggling to defend the run all season long. And then when you look at it as far as fantasy points, they're giving up 25.3 points per game against running backs. That's the second most allowed across the NFL. So yeah, I think that's plenty of love to go around between Edmonds and Mostert too. So I think both those guys could have a good game going along with Tua's, and I think those Dolphins are going to be able to put up a lot of points against Detroit. Moving into my other top start, I'm going to go with Joe Mixon against the Browns. I know Joe hasn't been getting much of his ceiling games this year. They rightfully so, though. They've been more of a pass-happy offense as of late because of Joe Burrow and the weapons they have. But this is a game where I think they might have to, depend on Joe, because if the Browns are able to take away the passing attack, or if the Bengals can just go up on them at any point, they're going to want to run the rock, and they're going to want to also exploit the fact that teams have been able to have a lot of success on the ground against Cleveland this season. When you look at as far as fantasy, the Browns have been giving up 23.9 points per game. That is the fourth most allowed across the NFL. So yeah, if you have Joe Mixon, I think this is where you're going to get one of his ceiling outcomes this week. My sits. Now, this is the first name, Aaron Jones. I'm going to go ahead and get this out here. You're going to play Aaron Jones. You have to. But it would be a temper my expectations with him in the lineup and in your redraft and dynasty leagues. Now, as far as daily fantasy, he's a name I would definitely look to avoid this week. And then AJ Dillon, he hasn't been what I thought he was going to be. I'm going to be completely honest. If you guys have been paying attention to me since the summer, I was very high on him because I thought him and Jones would get more action. But this is honestly on Matt LaFleur and the Packers offensive staff just not getting two of their talented players the ball more. I just don't get that at all. That's just I don't know. I think it's a bad coaching decision. Maybe it's not a decision to actively not get him the ball, but you can proactively figure out a way to get the ball in, especially Aaron Jones' hands as much as possible, and Dillon, especially when you got those wide receivers struggling. I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, not talking about fantasy. But anyways, keeping on the fantasy track of this, when you look at the Bills' defense, I said everything about how good they are, how refreshed they are. But then when you look at the fantasy numbers, though, they are allowing 13.2 points per game to running backs this year. That's the fewest across the NFL. So definitely some names. Those are definitely two names I would look to avoid if you can. But yeah, like I said, you're probably going to play Aaron Jones, but just temper your expectations with him in your lineup. My other sit, I'm going with Darrell Henderson against the 49ers. Basically because the 49ers, for whatever reason, they have the Rams number every time they face them in the regular season. And when you look at the matchup for fantasy, the San Francisco 49ers are giving up 13.4 points per game. That is the second fewest amount points per game allowed in the NFL. So they're right there behind the Bills as far as being one of the stingiest defenses against the run. So if you're thinking about playing Darrell Henderson, if you can, I would definitely look to leave him on my bench this week. So again, my top starts at the running back position: Raheem Mostert and Chase Edmonds against the Lions, Joe Mixon against the Browns. My sits: Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon against the Bills, and then Darrell Henderson against the 49ers. Moving into my top starts. Now, this first name, if you are a fantasy football manager, DJ Moore, you are probably, unless you won your matchup, you're probably upset that you left him on the bench and he finally has a classic DJ Moore performance. I may be one of those guys because I lost by a point in one of my fantasy football leagues, and there was all DJ Moore's points sitting on my bench. So if you're like me, very disappointed that he was on your bench and you finally blew up, I think you're going to see that continue into this week. They are going against the Falcons. The Falcons right now are giving up 30.6 points per game against wide receivers. That is the most in the NFL. So I don't think DJ is going to get all 30 of those points. I would certainly love that as one of his managers. But yeah, I think after seeing what he did with PJ Walker last week, PJ Walker is going to be the starting quarterback for Carolina again this Sunday. So I could look for that to continue and look for Moore to continue to see his targets and start getting back to that fantasy football production we're all used to seeing. My other starts, Yeah, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, fresh off a bye week. They're going against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers' defense is not the same. Teams have been able to throw the ball all over on them. And then when you look as far as fantasy points, they're giving up 29.6 points per game. That's that's the second most allowed in the NFL. So I could see both those guys possibly getting you each 15 plus points. This is a matchup I think that they can take advantage through the air and have Jalen Hurts have a more. I'm not necessarily. I'm saying he can't pass. I'm just saying like, he gets he gets like half of his production on the ground. I can see this being a pass-heavy production day for Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith. My top sits, those Jaguar wide receivers. It feels like I've been telling people to avoid them every week, just because it seems like they're not getting like a consistent target load every week, but then it's just a matchup. So yeah, if you got Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, or Marvin Jones Jr., this is not the week to play them. I said everything I said about that Denver Broncos defense when I talked about Trevor Lawrence earlier. And then when you look as far as terms of fantasy, they are given, just like the quarterback position, it's the same thing at wide receiver. They're only giving up 12.4 points per game to wide receivers this year. That's the fewest across the NFL. So, yeah, if you were thinking about playing any of the Jaguars wide receivers this week, this is definitely the week not to do so. And then my other sits. Now, this first name, temper your expectations. You're going to play Terry McLaurin. I'm playing Terry McLaurin. I'll never leave him out of my lineup. But again, he's going into his hometown, so I will say that as well. But yeah, maybe Curtis Samuel. That might be a name I would consider benching this week, because they are going against the Colts. Colts are just like those Broncos, right? Everybody's kind of has this image that the whole team is terrible just because of how the offense has looked, because this is a offensive league and people more judge a team by their offense over their defense, right? So people might have in their mind like, oh, the Colts, they just suck as a team, and their defense sucks too. It's not the case. Their defense is really good this year, especially over the past month and a half. Last week, they only gave up 12 points to the Titans offense. They didn't give up a touchdown. And they have a nice set of cornerbacks between Stephon Gilmore and Kenny Moore, and then they're finally getting Isaiah Rodgers in there. But when you look at the wide receiver position, they've been pretty stingy in fantasy this year. They're only giving up 14 points a game to wide receivers. That's the second fewest in the NFL. So, if like I said, Terry McLaurin, you're going to play him. I'm playing him, but I just got my expectations tempered that if he has a rough game, it was just a matchup. Definitely avoid him in any daily fantasy lineups. And then Curtis Samuel is the guy I would definitely consider benching this week. So again, my top starts at wide receiver, DJ Moore against those Falcons, and then A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith against the Steelers. And then my sits, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Marvin Jones against the Broncos, and then Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel against the Colts. Moving into the final segment, as always, the lovely tight end position that it's always a roll of a dice unless you got a Travis Kelce. And usually I say Mark Andrews there, but Mark Andrews actually had a 0-point game last week, which is very surprising, which just shows you, unless you're Travis Kelce, you may have a dud week every once in a while. But yeah, if you're looking to stream a tight end or and you're looking for those type of options, there's two guys I'll talk about. First guy I'm talking about, Irv Smith Jr. against the Cardinals. Just like I mentioned earlier about Kirk and this Vikings-Cardinals matchup, I got this weird feeling it's going to be a shootout where both teams score 30 points. So that means I think there's going to be plenty of an opportunity going Irv Smith's way. And then it's just the matchup. So, I think I say this every time I talk about any time I tell you guys to play a tight end against the Cardinals. For whatever reason, the last few years since I've been doing these type of start sets, the Cardinals have always, for whatever reason, have been traditionally bad against tight ends in fantasy. As far as what they're doing so far this year, they're giving up 13.2 points per game. That's the second most across the NFL. So I know there's some leagues where I don't need a tight end to pick up, but I've seen Irv Smith out there in the waivers. So if you're kind of not liking your tight end this week, and Irv Smith's out there, I would go pick him up and play him. My other start is a guy I talked about picking up off the waivers in my waiver wire video last night, which if you guys haven't watched, please, I always suggest to go back and watch that, because even though the waivers have been processed, some of the names I do talk about, especially the streamable defenses, those are some options that should be still out there for you. But anyways, going back to this, just in case you guys didn't watch it, Mike Gesicki against the Lions. It's a great matchup, like I said earlier about Tua Tagovailoa. And when you look at the fantasy matchup, they're giving up 10.3 points per game. That's the fourth most allowed in the NFL. Just like I said last night in the waiver wire video too, Mike Gesicki's name's been on the trade block. So like, if you pick him up and he ends up getting traded to a favorable situation, maybe he ends up being a long-term option for you. And what's great about this too is, say the Dolphins do want to get rid of him or trade him, they are going to probably want to put him on display, right, and show off his talents. So I could see them putting their trade asset out there, throwing him the ball a lot, letting him make some plays to maybe try to increase the trade value for him by next Tuesday. So that's another theory of mine. Mike Gesicki I think is a good play this week. My other sits, I'm going to go with Dawson Knox against the Packers. As much of a disappointment that Packers defense has been this year, they have been a little stingy against the tight end position. They're only giving up 3.7 points per game against tight ends. That's the third fewest across the NFL. So Dawson Knox, he's been a hit and miss fantasy tight end this year. So this is likely going to be a week that he does miss. My other sit, I'm going to go with Dalton Schultz against the Bears. I know Dak Prescott's back and he's got that connection with Dalton Schultz, but I think this is a week you may want to avoid him because when you look at the matchup, with the Roquan Smith and the linebackers there in Chicago, I guess they've been helping defend those passes in the middle of the area of that defense because they're only giving up 4.0 points per game against tight ends. That's the fifth fewest across the NFL. If you have Dalton Schultz, I could get it if you want to temper your expectations and play him, but this is definitely a week I would look to avoid him if you can. So again, top starts at the tight end position: Irv Smith Jr. against the Cardinals and Mike Gesicki against the Lions. My sits: Dawson Knox against the Packers and Dalton Schultz against those Bears. So that is this week's starts and sits for week 8. As always, guys, if you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you do subscribe to my channel so you always know when any of my videos do get posted. If you have any other questions, maybe I didn't talk about a player's name, you guys are always more than welcome to get in my comment section. Hit me up with a DM. You can text me if you got my number. There's always multiple ways you can get a hold of me. With that being said, I'm going to hop off here. I hope you guys win this week. I'll see you guys next Tuesday night when I do my top waiver wire ads and streamable defenses for week 9 of the NFL season. See you guys.